Good evening. My name is Doreen Riley, and I have served as John Carroll's Vice President for University Advancement for the past 13 years, which has been a wonderful experience, and I've gotten to know many of you on the call tonight. On behalf of John Carroll, we thank you for your generosity as loyal donors to our beloved university. Your gifts allow us to provide our current and our future students with the educational experiences that shape them into women and men for and with others. Your gifts also support our highly ranked faculty as they continue to be the very best teachers and scholars, as recognized by our top rankings in undergraduate teaching for decades. The health and safety of our community is very important to us, which is why we are hosting this invitation-only remote event. Of course, we would prefer to see you all and to thank you in person. And I pray the next time we do this, we can all be together. This evening, we are pleased to welcome two Jesuits, Reverend Tom Pipp and Mr. Andrew Cera, and they will discuss gratitude and the first principle and foundation of St. Ignatius. Father Pipp, who many of you know, is the Director of Ignatian Formation at John Carroll University and the Rector of the Jesuit community at Shell House. He has a BA in English from the University of Notre Dame and 3 master's degrees. 1 from Northwestern and 2 from the Jesuit School of Theology at Berkeley. Mr. Cera is a visiting Jesuit scholar. He is in the stage of Jesuit formation known as Regency, where he has been assigned to John Carroll to teach Ignatian spirituality, spiritual direction for the Ignatian Spirituality Institute, and he is assisting campus ministry. He has 2 master's degrees from Fordham University and a law degree from Louisiana State University. Father Pipp and Mr. Cera will not be wearing masks this evening, as they are members of the same household at Shell House. They are in our alumni lounge, which has been off limits to campus since March. Only 2 staff members are there with them tonight, and they are wearing masks. Marge Ockham, who helped organize this event, and Mac McDonald, our videographer and specialist in the classroom for IT support, is helping us. The rest of us, including our university president, Dr. Michael Johnson, are all connecting remotely. And now I would like to turn things over to Father Pipp and Mr. Cera to begin our conversation. It will be followed by a Q&A period at the end. You can submit your questions through the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. It will be monitored throughout this event. Welcome, Father Pipp and Mr. Cera.
Welcome. So good to be with you here this evening. Nice to be with you during a Thanksgiving time when we give thanks for all the friends of John Carroll who support this wonderful place so generously. As Doreen said, I'm a Jesuit priest. I've been the superior of Shell House Jesuit community for 3 years here at John Carroll, and I work with Dr. Ed Peck in the Office of Mission and Identity in programs that foster and enhance the Ignatian identity of the school. Primarily, we work with faculty and staff. And so it's been a wonderful 4 years here at John Carroll. And I'm joined this evening by Mr. Andrew Cera, and I'll let Andrew say a few words about himself.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So this is my first semester at John Carroll, and so I teach Ignatian spirituality to undergrads, and then I also teach in the ISI program, which has been a wonderful experience. So a shout out to any of my students if they're watching. But it's just been such a welcoming community here, and I'm just so grateful to be at John Carroll and to experience kind of the John Carroll life. Hoping that we're all going to be back here soon in person, but it's just good to be here.
Yeah, from what Andrew said, I certainly miss the kids. I think we all miss the kids. They bring so much to the campus, so we look forward to their coming back next semester. We thought tonight that we would talk about a source of gratitude, since the theme tonight is gratitude, a source of gratitude for us, and that is our Jesuit vocation. We both have a great sense of joy in being Jesuits, and I thought maybe we talk a little bit about the first stage of Jesuit formation, and that's where Andrew and I met, so I thought Andrew would say something about the novitiate.
Sure. The novitiate is the first stage of Jesuit formation, where When we enter, we're there for 2 years, and it's really kind of a school of the heart. We live together in community, we pray together, and we also experience these experiments that Ignatius has us do to kind of get involved into Ignatian spirituality and really live and to breathe the Ignatian charism. And so that's so the first person I met when I entered the Jesuits was Father Tom Pipp. So it's really a great joy to be back here with Tom now at John Carroll. And so, yeah, I think, so our novitiate is in St. Paul, Minnesota. And it's just a great 2 years of prayer and community and experiments and just shared life.
So I was the director of novices for 7 years in St. Paul, and those 2 years of the novitiate is a time of testing a man to see, is he called to this Jesuit life, and does the Society of Jesus see that he has a vocation to our way of life. And since our topic tonight is the principle and foundation, we want to talk about where novices might meet the principle and foundation, where they might pray about the principle and foundation for the first time. And so maybe Andrew can talk a little bit about that.
Sure, and perhaps I'll just read it maybe. I'm sure all of you have heard it before, but I've used this book once or twice before. So the principle and foundation that that Ignatius proposes for us is in 4 short paragraphs, 4 short sentences really. And he says that human beings are created to praise, reverence, and serve God our Lord, and by means of this to save their souls. The other things on the face of the earth are created for the human beings to help them in working toward the end for which they are created. From this, it follows that I should use these things to the extent that they help me toward my end and rid myself of them to the extent that they hinder me. To do this, I must make myself indifferent to all created things in regard to everything which is left to my freedom of will and is not forbidden. Consequently, on my own part, I ought not to seek health rather than sickness, wealth rather than poverty, honor rather than dishonor, a long life rather than a short one, and so on in all other matters. I ought to desire and elect only the thing which is more conducive to the end for which I am created. So that's a powerful kind of beginning of the exercises, and what is more conducive to the end for which I'm, this the Magis principle. And so this is kind of the beginning that we'll see throughout the exercises, right? As we see this principle and foundation continue to surface throughout ideas of indifference, these ideas of freedom, these ideas of creation itself, that we're created. And I think from that is where we get the source and the kind of this sense of gratitude. And I always like to think of one of Ignatius's early letters to one of the early companions. Ignatius said something striking, really, when I read it for the first time. He said that that one of the greatest evils, one of the greatest sins, is the sin of ingratitude. And you ask yourself why. And for Ignatius, it's because everything is a gift. Everything is the generosity of God. And ingratitude is the failure to recognize that. It says, in a sense, that, you know, I am the cause of my own existence, that I fully explain myself. And in that case, the world becomes very small. It becomes just the I. And it really, you lose touch not only with reality, but also with the relationship with love and with God. And so the force of gratitude, I think, courses throughout the entire exercises and all of Ignatian spirituality, but it really carries great strength and weight because it's almost this source of kind of our contemplative union with God. It's kind of this the still point of the turning world, so to speak, where we are able to live in that relationship with God, and the proper response to the generosity of God is our own sense of generosity back towards God. So I think maybe that's all I wanted to talk about right now. There's plenty more, but
well, maybe we could just talk about when a Jesuit novice enters, he makes the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius. And this is a book that Andrew has it here, where Ignatius wrote down his spiritual experiences in order to share them with people. And so in this book, you have the formula for the 4 weeks of the spiritual exercises that all Jesuit novices make. But of course, friends, partners, colleagues, lay people also make the exercises. And, you know, Andrew was talking about the Ignatian Spirituality Institute here that trains spiritual directors. Well, that is lay people making the exercises and praying through the exercises. As a Jesuit novice, Andrew made the exercises in the second semester of his novitiate in January of the first year. He would have entered in August. And that is 30 days of silent prayer with St. Ignatius's text and with the Bible, and praying over, you know, where is God calling me? What does God ask of me? How can I be closer to this God who is love? And maybe, Andrew, you want to talk a little bit about what were the exercises like, or where you made them, and how were 30 days of silence?
30 days of silence. It was, you know, you almost begin to move in the silence after the first, you know, few days. You kind of find that there's, you know, silence is the original language of God, right? And so you tap into that sense, and it becomes really beautiful. And you almost are able to get to know your brothers even better when you're with them in silence. You know, I was with 15 of my Jesuit brothers, and then we had guys from the East Coast and Canada as well. So we were up in Guelph at the Jesuit retreat house there, and it was just a beautiful experience to take that time, really in imitating Christ, how Christ goes up in the mountains to pray to God the Father. And it was very much that sense of tapping into that and letting that inform kind of the rest of prayer, the rest of life. You know, I always think of the psychologist Rollo May, who I think says, you know, the Olympic high diver, right before they dive, they take a pause, and that's what makes the dive elegant. And I think that's kind of what the exercises was for me. It was a time to pause, to consider what Ignatius is offering us here, which is really a walk through the Gospels, the contemplation of the life of Christ, a meditation on our own personal history, and then into this deeper relationship with Jesus, so we may know him, that interior knowledge of Christ, that we may love him more intensely and follow him more closely. And that feeds into then kind of the third and fourth weeks of the exercises, which kind of the unitive phase, where we contemplate the passion of Jesus and then his resurrection. And so it's just very Christocentric, but it allowed me to really encounter the person of Jesus in a very real way. And for that, the response for me was gratitude, and to know that these exercises had been made by Jesuits from the very beginning, and to see how they came from Ignatius's own experience. You know, Ignatius did not, he was of course, a very intelligent guy, right? But he learned these things from his own experience. And I think that was the beauty of it, because he wants us to also experience that encounter with Christ. And that's certainly what I experienced. And then, you know, towards the end, the great contemplation to attain love is almost a prayer of gratitude. Ignatius has us look at or contemplate these 4 main points of, you know, I'm created and I'm redeemed. Consider how Jesus does that for us, and how Jesus dwells in all things, all of creation, how Jesus labors for us in all of creation. And then finally, how everything is, all good things are a gift from God, like rays from the sun. So tapping into that elicited in me just a great sense of love, of generosity, and really kind of this contemplative union. We're able to find God and see God in all these things, kind of the transforming presence of God in my own life and the things around me. And you just learn to grow into a person of greater depth. I felt myself moving in that, especially in the silence. And that really, as I was making the exercises as well, I read the great 5th century monk John Cassian on prayer, and he also says, he lists kind of St. Paul's notions of prayer, of petition and pleas and things like that. But he says the highest prayer is the prayer of gratitude, the prayer of thanksgiving, because that's the closest prayer that we have to this contemplative union with Jesus. So it's all about this relationship, and that Ignatius has us contemplate throughout the entire exercises. So just a very powerful movement.
I mean, as you remember the exercises, was it difficult for you to enter into the 30 days of silence, or was it rough at certain times? I mean, the way you describe it, it's beautiful. It's the whole movement of the 4 weeks. But were there times when that was a challenge to be silent, to pray in that way?
Well, I think, and maybe I could tell a little story here with one of my novice classmates. He is a very gregarious and a good-natured guy, and he wrote a letter or a note under my door and said, "You want to go to the cathedral a mile away for Eucharistic adoration and pray in the afternoon, and we'll be totally silent." But then I said, "Fine." And so there we were. It was a blizzard outside, and there in Guelph, and so we walked a mile down the road together in complete silence, and we were sitting together there and in silent prayer. And after the hour, we turned around and we happened to see Father Novice Master Tom Pipp right behind us, and I think you may have said, "Well, this is good, but don't do it again," or something like that. And so we never did it again. But that was my only real encounter, I think, with kind of breaking the silence.
Yeah.
And it wasn't really even it was more broken just in the companionship and things like that. But it was just fun to turn around and to see you there praying with us.
Right. We really work on silence on the long retreat.
We work on silence.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Anything else that you remember about Guelph? I mean, my long retreat was a long time ago for my novitiate one, but
Yeah.
Guelph's a beautiful place in the Canadian wilderness, beautiful fields, places to walk.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, it's just a beautiful place of nature to really stop and to see and to grow. You know, the sense of gratitude for me on the retreat was, it led to a sense of openness, which then led to a sense of humility, which then opened up for me a whole new world of reality, really.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the beauty that I found, this sense of awe and wonder, which when I thought about it is really rooted in gratitude and rooted in this openness and humility, which then leads to perception of reality, then dilation, perhaps, as maybe Aquinas would tell us. But I really got the sense of, as I said before, that strength of gratitude. And then it's not just a word that we kind of throw out. It's something that really carries a lot of weight and elicits a response of generosity in us. And so, you know, the service mysticism we talk about with Ignatius is very much we grow in union with Christ the more we go out and serve and help others. And I think this all just comes back to gratitude. Now, so I was making the retreat. How did you feel as a director, directing people?
Yeah, from the other side, a director would see 4 or 5 men a day. So 4 or 5 men a day would be coming in to talk with me about their prayer for about an hour. And so there's great beauty in God's work in an individual's life. So on a particular day, the meditation might be Christ's feeding of the 5,000, and you'd ask someone to contemplate that scene. And, you know, 5 different people will have 5 totally different takes on it. So there's just great beauty in seeing how God works in the lives of different individuals. And I can imagine you would have found that with your novice classmates, the ways that they went through the retreat in different ways.
You know, and I found that our friendship actually grew during that, a lot more during that time, which was something, you know, I wasn't really anticipating. But when you're living and praying with these guys for 30 days in silence, there's a depth that happens there that was really beautiful, and I don't really know how to explain it. It was a mystery, but now you also get to see their idiosyncrasies and how they eat and how they walk and things like that. But which makes it even more fun.
Yeah.
But you really seem to get to know people in the silence.
And I think another blessing of the long retreat for me is it really gave me a discipline of prayer in my life. That after praying for 30 days and praying as Ignatius would have us pray, I couldn't imagine a life without praying. That we really have that in our hearts and in our lives. And always trying to choose what God would have us do on a particular day. So the exercises really flow into the rest of a Jesuit's life. Did you find your prayer different after the exercises?
Well, and I think, how it flows into the rest of life, certainly right after the principle and foundation comes the examen prayer. And the first step of the examen prayer for Ignatius is, what am I grateful for? What are the concrete things in my day that I'm grateful for? And so the exercises kind of just, as you say, feed right into the rest of life. And that gives it a particularly really beautiful quality about it. Because for Ignatius, I mean, the world is our monastery. And so that's a high kind of calling. And so we're called to be living in the world, but we're also called, to see and to find God, really to find God in all these things. And that requires of us a sense of attentiveness, and to live with an awakened heart, I think, is probably the greatest gift that I experienced on the exercises, was living with an awakened heart, having my heart awake to, the falling of rain, or, the blowing of a leaf, and also the bigger things as well. But just the noticing the stirrings in my own heart, noticing the stirrings of the world around me. And it makes life beautiful. Yeah.
And I think it's important to know that after the exercises, novices in those first two years of formation are then sent out to do God's work in the world. And one of the probations or the experiences, they're called experiments, that novices are sent out on, is the hospital experiment. So this is service of people in fragile health. Sometimes novices will go to large communities with developmentally challenged people to really, really serve Christ in people who are most in need. And maybe you want to talk, you were at the Little Sisters of the Poor.
I had the great grace of being at the Little Sisters of the Poor in St. Paul. So one of my classmates and I, we just stayed in St. Paul and worked with the Little Sisters there, who they run, it's a nursing home kind of setting. And that was it was holy ground, really, to be there, and to be there after the exercises, because I think it taught that living with the awakened heart that I found on the exercises, I carried that in with me into kind of this setting that is not necessarily something that's always, physically beautiful. I mean, you're watching people and accompanying people who are dying, and but knowing that there's something beautiful about that, because going back to the third week of the exercises, we watch and we are with Jesus as he dies and he goes through his passion, and to be able to awaken that sense of compassion that I experienced on the exercises, to take that into the real world and to sit with somebody as they're dying. And you begin to see it's not necessarily death as an annihilation, but it's this change, it's a consummation. But to live in that and to learn to receive that as a gift was something really, really beautiful for me. And so I think the grace of that experiment was, how do I receive people? How did Jesus receive those who were suffering, who were sick? And that took me right back to the exercises, and I was able to kind of think about that and live through that.
And I was going to identify with what you said about the hospital experiment. My hospital experiment was at Mount Carmel Mercy Hospital in Detroit, in the emergency room. And, Andrew asked the question, how do I receive Christ? How do I receive people as Christ received people? In that emergency room, we saw everything. We saw people who had been burned in fires, people who had heart attacks, the sick and the dying. And so it elicited a great generosity of service in me in that hospital experiment. So after the exercises, that's one way in which we serve. We take Christ out into the world.
Okay. Great. So I think, just going back to even what is so important for Ignatius, even going to the annotations, which is kind of the beginning, the prep work for the exercises. Ignatius says in the very beginning, annotation 5, the person should receive the exercises, enter into them with a great spirit of generosity towards their Creator and Lord. And I think we contemplate that. Why is Ignatius telling us to engage and to kind of proceed with this spirit of great openness, this spirit of great generosity? And it goes back to the fact that everything is gift, that we are the generosity of God. And what is the only real response we could make is that return of the gift, which we then see in the contemplation to attain love, the great Suscipe prayer. Lord, take and receive all my liberty, my memory, my understanding, and my will. And we're not relinquishing this, but in a great sense of generosity that we felt from gratitude, we say, Lord, I'm going to give you back my life, not to relinquish it, but to take it up into your own world and to make it fruitful and to make it beautiful. And so, yeah, I guess the whole spirit of generosity and gratitude, they go together as part of this great cosmic dance of how do we. But the response to God is generosity, and we're grateful for all of that. So it's kind of that's what, in my experience, creates that relationship and creates that dance that goes back and forth of the generosity of God, and recognizing that in other people, in all those things that nourish us, that give us warmth, that that they bring us closer to community. And so, it made me think about how do I eat? Ignatius says in the third week, he kind of tacks on seemingly this thing that says rules for eating. And you're like, why is he putting this in here? But that God dwells in those things that nourish us, and to be awake to that and to be grateful for those things, which perhaps, I wasn't necessarily always awake to that. And in those things that give us warmth, when you're sitting around the campfire with your friends, I tell my students a lot, are you aware that maybe Christ is dwelling here with you? And again, to be grateful for that.
And I think a lot of my Jesuit life, I'm grateful for the people I've met. You mentioned, what's it like to be a director and to direct novices. I think I met so many wonderful men who are compassionate and prayerful and zealous over those years of being the novice director. Just beautiful people. And I think in a Jesuit vocation, that's what I'm grateful for. This morning we had a campus ministry staff meeting, and these are wonderful people who are serving John Carroll. And without my Jesuit vocation, I would have never met those people. The students who are still around campus, who are really serving here at a time of quiet. So I think a lot of a Jesuit vocation is seeing Christ in the people that you're with. And I've had a wonderful journey, met many wonderful people. So that's a great source of my gratitude.
Mm-hmm. I think, also what I've learned even more is to be grateful for the things, for the gifts, it's, even if you don't like the package, right? Sometimes we don't like the wrapping paper, but the gift is still there. And so, recognizing that and going deeper, that if all these things truly come from God, how are they working towards my sanctification and my in my vocation and helping others as well? And to help souls was what Ignatius, was his way of proceeding. And in whatever way that took, Ignatius has us help people. And how do we do that? Because we find that God is a helping God. God is a generous God. And so all these things kind of come back to the sense of generosity and gratitude, and which puts us in touch with the ultimate reality of things. Otherwise, we kind of live superficial lives, and really lives that are out of touch with the deepest meaning of things.
When you mention the gifts, and sometimes you don't like the wrapping, what do you do in those situations? Because all is gift, even something that one might not like. How are you more in tune with God in those situations?
Yeah. And the great closing line of the Diary of a Country Priest, where he says, doesn't matter, grace is everywhere. And I think, so that kind of feeds into the idea of not necessarily liking the wrapping paper, but to recognize, so what do? Well, I usually go to the chapel and pray some more, is what I normally do. Say, Lord, show me where this is, and to recognize that that perhaps, God answers prayers in ways that I don't expect sometimes, and to be aware of that, or to be aware that this gift or this thing is happening for some future preparation. And so, but to ask that question, God, what are you up to in this, is kind of a prayer that I usually pray when I don't have kind of perfect clarity, which is really never, because we live, right, I don't know how you are, Tom, but we live in this knowing and not knowing, and how do you walk in that? How do I walk in that? How do I still receive these gifts with reverence and with gratitude? Because that's what keeps this kind of contemplative union alive. And what I think,
especially during this time when we've been forced to slow down, we don't have the activities we usually have. You really do have to be more silent and just appreciate the small things around you, each day, each person, because life has been so changed. And yet, for all its sorrow and all its pain these days, it does seem that God is asking us to notice his beauty in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you found it that way or.
Yeah, well, I've just been really, I think, resonating with the fact that the whole world is our monastery, and trying to think, okay, are we called to be a little more monastic right now, and to cultivate those rhythms of prayer and kind of the singing of the Psalms, and to maybe say, okay, Lord, what are you trying to show me something else here in my prayer? Show me a relationship that I've maybe taken for granted. Show me, this great education we receive as Jesuits. I spend more time just being grateful for that, and the relationships that I've formed in the classroom and with certain apostolates. Once a month, as you know, I keep up with 4 of my closest friends. We do our Zoom meeting now, and it's just a really beautiful way to keep in touch with people and to have those friendships grow and not just kind of fizzle out during this time. So kind of making this time as fruitful and useful, I think, as I can, is kind of how I'm trying to. It gives me more time to read Ignatius. So I'm grateful for that, because you just begin to see really his warmth. That I think a lot of people, when they first encounter Ignatius, he's kind of this stern, almost general or soldier kind of guy, but really he's the eternal pilgrim, and that sense that he's a beggar before God. Again, this idea that all is gift for him. And it just really, it inspires a largeness of heart that, as they said of Ignatius, right, his heart was bigger than the world. And where does that come from? I mean, it comes from God. It comes from that relationship with God. And myself meditating on that, I think, strengthens my own vocation and strengthens my own relationship and walk in this life.
Definitely.
So
maybe we want to talk about one more thing. From the novitiate, we're talking about a little bit about formation, but the sense of gratitude we get from these experiences in the novitiate, the gratitude of prayer from the exercises, in the hospital experiment, gratitude from being able to serve, and then novices are also sent out on a pilgrimage. We all go through pilgrimages in life. Our life is a pilgrimage, but maybe you want to say something about your own pilgrimage in the novitiate and how did that work and what was that like? They're sent out for 30 days on a pilgrimage with, what did you get?
$35.
$35 and a bus ticket. And off you went. And the purpose, St. Ignatius says, of this pilgrimage is dependence upon God alone. And so we are with God and asking God for assistance. What's the next move? What should I do? Where should I go? And maybe you want to talk about where you went and what that was like.
Sure. Well, before that, I recall you giving me $35 and then saying, I don't want to see your face for 30 days. So we'll see you later. Right, I went on a Greyhound bus to Ontario, Canada, and I was making my way to a beautiful community called Madonna House in Combermere, which is a couple hours from from Ontario and from Ottawa, sorry. And as I was on the Greyhound bus, and I was thinking to myself, you know, the sun starts setting, and you're thinking, what am I going to do? I don't know anybody in this city. I don't know anybody on this bus. And a half hour outside of Ottawa, the lady right next to me on the bus pulled out a rosary and started praying her rosary. And I said, "Hi, my name is Andrew." And we started talking a little bit, and she was extremely generous and said, "Oh, I know right where you have to go." So she introduced me to this priest in Ottawa, and I eventually made it to Cumbermere, Madonna House, and that kind of started the journey. I worked on so I basically worked for my stay. I stayed there for about a week on this, I like to call it kind of a Catholic worker farm kind of thing. And we worked and we prayed, and but then I moved on and I went. So I stayed all in Canada throughout my pilgrimage, and again I went to Midland to visit the martyr shrine, the Jesuit martyr shrine there. And again I showed up and the sun was setting, and you get that feeling of, what am I going to do? Am I going to sleep outside? What's going to happen? And I walked into a mass, a vigil mass on Saturday that was happening, and the deacon came up to me after mass and said, "Hey, you're not from around here," as I had my bag and I hadn't shaved, for a week and a half. And he said, "Hey, come on, let me buy you dinner." And so anyway, and there are just stories all like that. And what I found was I was expecting kind of the big explosions of grace to happen on the pilgrimage, but really it was the people and the encounters that I had. And here was this deacon and his wife that let me stay in their apartment for 2 days. They had no idea who I was. And he said, and we prayed together and we shared meals together. And I still am in contact with them. It's a beautiful, it was a beautiful experience, but it was all the contemplation to attain love, that all good things come from God as like rays from the sun. And that's what I felt like. It was the rays from the sun throughout the entire pilgrimage. I only spent one night outside, which was in Montreal. There was no generous people. There were generous people there, but I stayed one night outside. But that's what it was. It was the people and the encounters that I found along the way.
Much to be grateful for.
And I found that I came back to St. Paul with $1 in my pocket, but I never missed a meal over those 30 days. And looking back, I don't really know how that happened, but well, it was the generosity of people. From old grandmothers to college students who were just interested in what I was doing, and I was interested in what they were doing. And you build the sense of small community kind of as you go, and just a lot of and I think a lot of grace. I would often think of the great line, in Don Quixote, the great musical, where Dulcinea asks Don Quixote, why do you do all these crazy things? I got a lot of that. Why are you doing this ridiculous pilgrimage? And I thought of Don Quixote a lot because he said, so that I might add a measure of grace to this world. And I thought that was the grace for me, is again, to help souls and to have these spiritual conversations with people who I found were really hungry for that, which was inspiring to me. Yeah.
And that's what we hope our lives always are, to add a measure of grace to this world, to help souls. And for all of those of you who are out there who are alumni of John Carroll or friends of John Carroll, I'm sure that you share in that desire to help others, to help souls. You have questions or no? Okay. All right. Well, anything else to add, Andrew, or anything else you'd like to say?
This is my first fireside chat.
This is my first fireside chat.
I hope we did okay. I hope we're not. This was fun.
But thank you to our audience. Thanks for being with us this evening. And we hope that this conversation leads you to gratitude during this Thanksgiving time. From John Carroll, we wish you all a happy Thanksgiving and a restful and beautiful holiday weekend. Thank you and take care.